Thank you so very much. It's certainly a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you all today and just be a part of this amazing series. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to just join in such a wonderful celebration of women in Women's History Month. So thank you again. Today I'm going to be talking about the anatomy of opportunity, and it's really been a pleasure. This is kind of from a talk that I did almost about a little over a decade ago or so about now. And so it's been fun to really look at how our thoughts about the opportunities that we do have to find that balance have evolved over the last decade. So just a little bit about me. I am the director of public health programs and associate professor at LaSalle University. My background is in public health, where I've worked for over 20 years, and I've done a lot of work with community health promotion and prevention, lots of public health research and working on public health interventions. Some of the areas of expertise are listed here where you can see, but I've had a lot of focus on women's health for sure, looking at minority health as well as issues around violence and discrimination, also working with organizations to implement their DEI assessments. And so I've had the opportunity to engage in lots of different spaces in order to promote wellness. I'm also the founder of the RUEC Lab, which you can see a little bit about on the slide as well. Well, I don't want to waste any time in our topic today. And so, as was mentioned, I'm excited to really speak about women's, in the name of Women's History Month, and the theme that was chosen for this year, I'm super excited about, which is listed here. It's women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so it's such an important theme, and I'm excited to really dive into that a little bit more. And you can see here that this theme is really trying to elevate women who understand that we need to eliminate bias and discrimination entirely from our institutions, and to celebrate the women who have been working so tirelessly in our communities to do that. So before we kind of just get into it a little bit, I just want to pause for a second to just make sure that we're all on the same page as far as how I'm going to use these terms. There are a myriad of definitions for all of these terms, certainly much more comprehensive than what's listed here, but these are just some straightforward, simple definitions that can kind of get us all started in our conversation today as we kind of recognize and acknowledge the theme that was selected for this year's Women's History Month. So for diversity, we're thinking about the proportionate representation across different dimensions of difference among the human race, right? And so thinking about different dimensions of difference, that is going to think we're going to lean in towards diversity. Inclusion, we're really talking more about making sure that everyone is not only included, but visible and heard and considered. And so we are often asking questions about who's not at the table, who's not included in these various spaces. Belonging, we're really wanting everyone to feel like they're treated and feel like they're a full member of the community. And so it is oftentimes looked at as the feeling of inclusion, feeling of belonging, feeling that they are a part of the community. And then equity, right? We want to make sure that we really understand the diverse attributes and needs of our community members, and making sure that they all have access to the necessary resources that they need in order to be successful. Now, many people have also added a justice into this, right? Understanding that we can't really do any of that really well if we are not attending to justice. That justice, if we are really thinking about a justice framework, then we are going to be able to actualize those different principles. And so we're thinking about questioning and sharing power. Ultimately, how do we center other people's voices? How do we center their narratives? What's important to them, their experiences in our everyday lives and our policies and our practices and our programs and our workspaces, in our communities, in our homes, right? How do we make sure that other people's voices and narratives and experiences are centered, and that we are able to ultimately remove the structural barriers that currently exist, and that people are trying to do the workarounds for. And so this is kind of where I'm going to start our conversation, thinking about opportunity and the anatomy of opportunity. And I love this slide and I love this picture, because ultimately what I would like to have us move even beyond some of the terms that I just spoke about. I want us to really push ourselves and challenge ourselves to really think about this concept of thriving, not just that people are here, that they're included, that they might feel like they're, somewhat belong, but that they're actually flourishing and they're thriving. So how can we make sure that our girls and our women in our communities are not just here, not just included, but that they're able to thrive in our communities? Because unfortunately, so often we are this plant coming up from concrete. What happens is that we are thriving maybe in spite of our environment, in spite of our community, in spite of the challenges that we have to face, instead of because of those communities, because of the environment that has been laid and nurtured and nourished. And so I want to challenge us all to think about the spaces in our lives in which we are this flower emerging from concrete, and that we're striving to be successful and striving to achieve in spite of the environment, instead of because of the environment that we have laid. And so as we think about the anatomy of opportunity, I encourage everyone to lay out and even write down, if you will, what are some of those things that you would have as the components of your opportunity. If you had to draw out the anatomy of opportunity in your mind, what would that compose of? And we'll come back to that towards the end as we open it up for questions. So before we get into the anatomy of opportunity and what we need in order to increase and improve and enhance the opportunities that girls and women have, I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate some of the amazing successes that we have had as women throughout the years. And so some of the successes are listed here. We see women make up 47% of the US labor force in 2023, which is a huge increase, of course, from previous decades. Women outnumber men in college educated workforce. And so we see that our women are certainly pursuing education. About a third of workers in the country's 10 highest paying occupations are women. And so we see again that these have been increases from our previous decades. Women's overall employment rates are actually 100% of what they were before the pandemic. And so we have seen women have been able to recover from the great losses and the huge impact that the pandemic had on the employment sector. And so we see that women have been able to make those successes and strides. And ultimately, we see that women in the labor force their rate for women hit 77%, which has exceeded that even in 2019, again, before the pandemic. And so women are entering and a part of the labor force and striving and thriving in that way. This really just, again, shows Montgomery County specifically. And so we have also noted some of those same successes that I just showed overall for our population, that women are indeed receiving their education, that they are having higher rates of graduate education and college, earning bachelor's degrees as well. And so we have lots to celebrate in the achievements that women have been able to make over the last several years. However, as we celebrate the amazing achievements and certainly advancements that so many women have been able to make, we also have to acknowledge, first and foremost, that there have been lots and lots and lots of opportunity stressors. There are so many things that keep us, and there's so many barriers, challenges, obstacles that too many women have to still overcome, jump through. And so I just want to spend some time first before we get to what opportunities should look like for us, is to really understand, well, what are those barriers that women are facing? What are some of those opportunity stressors that I like to call, that are making it very hard for women to actualize the opportunities that we think that we have? And so, first and foremost is understanding poverty. Women still have disproportionately higher rates of poverty, even equitable educational environments. While we've made so many advances in education, we still see that girls have an increased rates of not finishing high school as well. There are numerous employment challenges. I'll highlight a few. So again, while we have noted some amazing accomplishments in the workforce, we still have many challenges that too many women are having to overcome. Caregiving serves as an enormous barrier and challenge for lots of different women. Certainly experiences of chronic and toxic stress and adversity makes it very difficult for women to thrive. They truly are trying to be that flower emerging from concrete, which causes lots of mental health challenges. Discrimination and inequities are still rampant in our experiences and help produce harm and make it very difficult for women to prosper and to be healthy and well. Ultimately, women feeling like they are fighting to still prove themselves, prove their work in too many spaces, and childcare. And these, unfortunately, are just a snapshot of some of those opportunity stressors. There are many that certainly many women still experience. And these are just some examples of some of those areas that I just discussed. And so, again, while we can see women are entering the workforce, while women are earning increased dollars, we still see that there is a wage gap between men and women. And we see that wage gap increases throughout women's careers. And so we see that women's earnings really begin to plateau mid-career. And so this really has a great impact in overall lifetime earnings for women, and as well as their wealth building, as well as their ability to age well and to have the resources that they need as they age. And so we see that those differentials still exist. We see not only is there a gender gap, but we see that minorities and women of color still also have larger gaps due to the structural inequalities that continue to exist. And so there are both gender and racialized gaps here. And when we look at Montgomery County, as I mentioned, we still see that poverty rates. And so that women are still experiencing higher rates of poverty, not only nationally, not only within our state, but certainly within our county as well. And in addition to that, thinking about occupational segregation, while there's been so much advancement in women's opportunities, we do still see the clustering of women largely in a few occupations. Now, this, you might say, well, what difference does it make if women are earning, in the workforce at a high rate? But this does have lots of impact because it also contributed to the pandemic's disproportionate impact on women's employment, because those sectors were also hardest hit often by the pandemic. And so we saw that great impact specifically on women because of their disproportionately sort of concentrated in specific occupations. And we can just see here, before the pandemic, almost 6 in 10 women were employed actually in just 3 sectors that are listed here. And so we do want to be able to diversify the sectors that women have access to. Caregiving is a huge opportunity stressor. I think just in talking with so many women who are caring for their parents, caring for siblings, caring for their children, caring for others within their community, caregiving is such an intimate part an integral part of I think many women's experiences. And so we see huge contributions of caregiving to some of the opportunity stressors, honestly, that women are experiencing. So women do have a disproportionate burden of family caregiving responsibilities, and that continues to be true for many women. And what this creates is that there's a lack of paid leave protections. And so women are really experiencing caregiving and have the responsibilities and roles of caregiving much more frequently. And then there's not those protections that help to provide resources for women who are in those roles. In fact, women are 5 to 8 times more likely to experience caregiving impact on their employment. And those reduced hours that they have and their time away from their employment actually influences them economically over the long run. So not just short term in the loss of the immediate earnings that they might have, but also over the long run as they influences their Social Security benefits and retirement benefits as well. And so caregiving has multiple ways that it really does create a huge opportunity stressor for so many women in our communities. When we look at globally, how are women doing? I like to see, okay, again, we have made so many advances, but how are we doing balancing, like you talked about in the beginning, how are we doing balancing all the many demands that we have? And unfortunately, many women are not doing as well as we would want them to be able to do. They're not thriving. And so even though we're here and we're in these spaces, at times we're not thriving in these spaces. In fact, research across the board in many spaces all says the same thing, that more women are sad, angry, and worried than ever before. In fact, 4 in 10 say they experience worry and stress during a lot of the previous day, and 3 in 10 experience sadness, and 1 in 4 anger. So women are just stressed and worried, experiencing sadness and anger, feelings of overwhelmedness. And so many women, while we're here, we are struggling to be well. We're not showing up well in these spaces. In addition to sort of our mental health, 1 billion women are still struggling to afford food worldwide. And the number has doubled for those women who are still struggling to afford shelter. Nearly 1 billion people say that they spent a lot of their previous day in physical pain, and 1 in 4 women said that their health problems actually keep them from participating in their normal activities. And so we see mental and physical health challenges still persist in many women and serve as a huge stressor to actually having them thrive in their spaces. As I said before, mental health, it has been a huge impact on women. Women are twice as likely to suffer from depression, for example. And I also want to just mention motherhood. While I talked about caregiving and caregiving is lots of different types of caregiving women experience. Motherhood is also actually, while it's such an amazing privilege, it also is an opportunity stressor. We see employment dips and gaps in employment for women who have particularly young children, but even those gaps remain for women who have even children who are up to 18. And so we see, while the largest gaps are in the employment in the labor force are for women who are with young children, we do see those gaps persist. And so all women with children have lower rates of employment. But we also see that in the US and locally, we have continued to struggle with maternal mortality. And so we understand that these are something that we really need to begin to address even more. While there's growing attention to this issue, not only nationally, but more locally, this is an area of huge stress for so many women, particularly women of color with high rates of maternal mortality that continue to persist. And so really getting a handle on this, really having effective policies and programs programs and practices that can ultimately promote health and wellness, both preconception health as well as maternal health, is integral to really advancing the opportunities that women will have. And so obviously advancing those opportunities both in the workplace, but also for their health and well-being. We have too many women who are still suffering from intimate partner violence and relationship violence and homicide, women who are suffering from overweight and obesity. And I want to pause here because a lot of times when we hear these words, we think, oh, well, what people can do, right? Well, people can just need to eat more and exercise more. But what I want to highlight here is actually the structural inequality part of that, the reasons why women are so stressed, the reasons why they don't have access and ability to eat in a certain way and to exercise. Also, the increase in research that shows us the other contributing factors, the increased levels of stress that actually can lead to increased weight gain. And so the decisions that we make often are not just decisions that are related to these health habits. These are a result of experiences with discrimination, experiences with inequities, also a result of the immense chronic and toxic stress that so many women are dealing with. And so as we think about opportunity, we have to think about these things as well. And lastly, nearly 1 in 3 women seriously considered attempting suicide, which is up nearly 60% from a decade ago. And so as we have made so many strides and so many advancements over the last decades, this is certainly an area where we are going backwards very, very, very quickly. We are doing worse actually now than we were previously. And women also 1 in 5 reported experiencing sexual violence, which again is an increase. And so we just need to also pause and really understand women's stressors so that we can really begin to now talk about the opportunities that we would like to be able to provide girls and women. And I have this slide because I think one of the most detrimental opportunity stressors is that everything that I have just discussed, so much of it is invisible. So much of it is invisible. So many women talk about this feeling of invisibility, that their stressors, their striving, all the work that they're doing, the sort of hidden tasks, hidden responsibilities, hidden communities and community work and committees that women serve on in our workspaces, even in the DEI space. While we applaud and celebrate this month all the women who have been advocating for DEI, it often is in addition to all of their responsibilities and their community organizations, in their workspaces, in their churches, and their nonprofits that they're working with or volunteering with. And so many women talk about this feeling of invisibility, that their needs, their struggles, their challenges are hidden from not only society, hidden not only from their employers and their workspaces, from those community organizations where they might be affiliated with, but also at times hidden from their family members, hidden from those who are closest to them. And so women at times are bearing such an immense burden, trying to keep it all together, trying to do the things that they would like to do or called to do and feel inspired to do, but are facing so many challenges that are largely invisible for so many people. And so I think that that is one of the most devastating things beyond just all of the opportunity stressors, is that a lot of those stressors are invisible and we don't see them and we don't acknowledge them as we attempt to make sure that our girls and women have the opportunities that they want to have. So with all of that, I lay the context for, so what does the anatomy of opportunity look like? What should we really be thinking about? Well, I just wanted to start with this image. This is from a survey where over 1 million women around the world were asked, what do you want most for your health and well-being? And this is some of the things that women said. Of course, having access to affordable health care was really important among the top. tiered responses, thinking about education and economic opportunities. Again, for us, overcoming some of those economic and employment and educational barriers that we just discussed. Thinking about opportunities for physical nutrition, physical health and nutrition, thinking about opportunities for improvement of our mental and emotional well-being, certainly amongst some of the top tiered responses. But I'd like to propose some additional things related to what we just heard. And so I think I'm going to talk about the anatomy of opportunity in a few different landscapes. The first is thinking about our macro level. So what are some of those opportunities that we need to be thinking about? The first thing is equitable policies. And by equitable, I do not mean equal. I do not mean that we all get the same thing, policies that apply equally to everyone, but I mean equitable policies, policies that actually really think about and assess the needs that differing people have, diverse groups, diverse populations have, and being able to provide the resources that everyone needs in order to reach that level of thriving that we're aiming for. And so this means reevaluating all of our policies, right? Our health policies, our education policies, our environment policies, our labor policies, even our workplace policies, housing and childcare, certainly. There's so many of our policies, really evaluating them with the lens for equity to really look at the outcomes that they are producing. And if we have policies that are producing harmful outcomes or inequitable outcomes, that we are being more proactive to address those policies. We need to really look at the resources that are needed for well-being and success. Again, while so many women are in the workspace, they are having increased earnings, but we know that they're not necessarily thriving. They're not necessarily doing as well as we want. So what resources are needed for mental health, for well-being, for success in these various spaces? And how can we be more proactive in making sure that women have access, girls and women have access to these resources? And definitely investing in people and places. And so how can we be better with investing in women and girls, right? And so what are the opportunities that we could do, right? What are the things that we should be thinking about? We know that women are disproportionately represented amongst those who are living in poverty. So what are some creative and innovative strategies to invest in those women who are still struggling with poverty, right? And so how are we looking at that? What structural systems exist currently that are still supporting and promoting a pathway to poverty, right? We want to eliminate those pathways to poverty. We want to invest in people, and we want to explore the narratives that we have around risk, right? And so that it's not that it's risky for us to be investing in people, in women, in girls, right? And so we want to make sure that we are investing in them and that we support places that are investing in girls and women. And then this is at the micro level. And so we want to make sure that we are doing a myriad of different things, I think, at the micro level, which is encouraging. There are so many things that we can do. I think the first and foremost, one of the things that we can do is nurture creativity, curiosity, and confidence. I think one of the joys, the true joys of my life has been being a mother to my two children. And one of the things that has really always impressed me is their creativity, their just natural, innate creativity. And I always just think about how much creativity children are innately born with, and how, as they've aged, I see how our systems, our stressors, our troubles, our challenges, the things that they experience slowly try to winnow that creativity away so that they become adults that are deprived of some of that innate creative potential that they had as children. And so I think one of our biggest goals and one of the biggest things that we can do at the micro level is to continue to always nurture creativity, to make sure that we are encouraging, inspiring curiosity and confidence in our girls and even in our women, to make sure that we're not winnowing it away, because so many women would say, we don't have the time, right? We don't have the capacity. We don't have the privilege of being curious or being creative because we're so tired, we're so burdened, we're so overwhelmed, we're so stressed. There's data that suggests that a large percentage of women are struggling with fatigue as well. And so these are things that we need to think about. How can we nurture creativity, confidence, and curiosity? We need to really explore these harmful messages that we have received, right? And so as we think about the impact of structural inequities, we have to think about how discrimination is operating, how it's showing up here. I will share just a quick story from research that I did a few years back with particularly with Black women, exploring their experiences of racism and sexism and how that influences their self-reported health outcomes. And I never will forget one of the women who shared that she is a lawyer and she is trying to kind of move up in her firm. And she had not been feeling well for many days, but she talked about how she couldn't go to see the doctor. She couldn't take a day off. She couldn't see her doctor. And this was a woman who obviously she had some resources. So it wasn't that she couldn't afford to see the doctor, but she felt she couldn't see the doctor because she had to show up. She had to perform. She had to show that she was invincible, that she was at the doing, bringing her A game, that she was that person that could be promoted, that could be relied on and depended upon at all costs. So while she felt so physically felt poor and felt like she probably should be seeking care, she felt that she couldn't. She had to feel like she had to choose between her advancement in her career and her health. And that should never, ever, ever be a decision, a choice that we are asking women to make. So we have to really explore and deconstruct these messages, these hidden invisible messages, right? These invisible ways that women and girls are making decisions based on things that they believe that's going to get them ahead. And so we have to really assess that, evaluate that. We have to find ways to promote passion, efficacy, and courage. Again, what do women believe that they can do? What do girls believe that they can do? What are they passionate about? And how are we supporting their passions? How are we supporting their efficacy so that they can believe that they can do what it is that they desire to do? And then how do we inspire their courage so that they can step out and do it? How do we have communities and safe spaces and organizations that actually encourage that? Because in order to truly encourage passion, efficacy, and courage, we have to do the other thing below it, which is reframe our failures. How do we make it safe to fail? Yes, how do we make it safe to fail? We all act as if we just emerged on a perfect path to where we came from, and talk to so many girls and so many young women who feel like they're failing and feel like no one who is successful has walked the path that they have walked, because the stories that we often tell, especially nowadays, so much worse on social media, we're all showing our highlight reels, all talking about and discussing about our highlight reels, our successes, how we've overcome, but we don't share the struggles that we've had. We don't share the failures that we've had. We don't share the time that we didn't do it. We didn't show up. We couldn't turn it in. We messed up. We had a mistake. We didn't pass the test. We struggled with the course. Whatever it is, we don't share those things. And so many girls or women are feeling inadequate because the stories they hear all the time are only the successes. But the reality is we cannot get to success, and we can't even get to thriving without failures. It's a part of the human experience. It actually is a part of the growth experience, right? We can't ever learn to walk without falling. There is no person that just decided at whatever age, at 1 year old, I'm just gonna walk today, and just walked and never fell. That is a lie. It's a fallacy, right? But that is what we act like, right? And so how do we model that we must fail, we must fall in order to succeed, in order to thrive? And how do we make it safe for people to do so? How do we identify an opportunity team? I love the thought of having opportunity teams. These are people, they might be mentors, they might be educators, they might be volunteers, they might be coaches, they might be clergy, there might be family members, they might be just others in your network, maybe supervisors. But how do we really identify people who are on your opportunity team, people who can help you get to where you want to go? Right? They could include therapists, all of these people who can help you, who can support you, who can challenge you, who can provide a pathway for you to reach the goals that you have set for yourself. And so I believe everyone needs an opportunity team. We think about those of you who love sports. I always just love to see the coaching staff and the team around the athletes, the people who make it possible, the people who are at their most elite athletes at the highest point of the game. They still have people that are around them, people who are coaching them, people who are providing needed, necessary knowledge and wisdom and resources for them to achieve even higher. And so sometimes, even though that's modeled in these amazing elite athletes, sometimes we forget that. Sometimes in our everyday lives, we don't have a team around us who are cheering us on, who are giving us key strategies and wisdom and techniques and helping us to overcome our weaknesses. We don't have that. And so we fail to have those opportunities because we don't have the right team of people around us. I think we also need to engage our teams in leadership and critical thought. One of the things I think is important for us all to realize, and I think it's easy for hopefully us to realize, is the world that we're living in 2024 is so different from even a decade ago. One of the things that I realized, I've had the privilege of being married to my amazing husband for over 17 years now. And we got engaged in Paris. And I remember during our engagement, we went to I went to call home to share the news that we had just, I just got engaged. He had just proposed to me, and we had to find a payphone, and we had a calling card, um, and we had to, dial the numbers, find the payphone, get the calling card, and talk really quickly so that, before the calling card expired. And we had the opportunity to go back to Paris on our 10th anniversary. Of course, we had the cell phone with the plan. It was none of that, right? I'm taking pictures of everything. We're FaceTiming our kids. And I just thought, wow, what a practical realization of how much our world has changed within our lifetime, right? Within a decade, we went from calling cards to me FaceTiming and talking with our children live, walking around. And so I think some of the times we make the mistake of really not leaning into and understanding that our world is so different. And this is how we should be engaging our young people and teens in their leadership and their ideas and their critical thought about some of these issues, because there are some things that we don't understand fully because our world is different. We're still trying to do some of these things the old way, a way that worked a decade ago. We're still using calling cards in some of our policies and practices and programs, but the world is different. No one does that anymore. We're just walking around FaceTime, right? And so we need to understand, what are some of those ways, what are some of the strategies that need to look differently, need to feel different, so that our young women and girls can really thrive. And with that, revisiting the story that we're telling them. What are the narratives that we have about ourselves, about our accomplishments, about our abilities to thrive? And lastly, locus of control. I think so much research has suggested that really, above all, above the advancements, above the education, above the employment, what matters ultimately most for people is that locus of control, that ability, that freedom to do it what it is that they value most, right? And so even when people have earning high incomes and have, high powered jobs, if they don't have the ability to do what matters to them most, that freedom to do what matters to them most, what's most meaningful, impactful to them, then they are not able to thrive. And so how do we make sure that we have opportunities for people to actually engage in the work and the spaces and the family life and the freedom and the autonomy of the things that matter to them most? So as we think about the opportunity landscape, I think we have to deconstruct these narratives around superwomen, the norms and stereotypes that we have. I talked to so many women in my research, and they all talked about wearing an S on their chest. And so, although we like that, we like to pat ourselves on the back. We like to even give ourselves accolades because of we've done it all, and this anomaly of trying to do it all. But the fact is that while we are superheroes because we're amazing, we're not superheroes in that way, right? We are women. We need to understand that it's okay to ask for help, that we don't have to be superheroes. We don't have to do it all. And we need to reject the narratives that say that we do. I love this recently I discovered this thought of thinking inside the box, and I really actually love it. So I definitely support thinking outside of the box, and that certainly has its role. And we spent so much time telling people to think outside the box. And I think it's so important for innovation and technology, for us to be thinking outside the box, right? Think about something that's never been done. Eliminate the box, throw away the box, right? All of that. But I came across, actually, I was listening to another podcast on leadership teaching, and it was talking about this notion of thinking inside the box and how when the person first discovered it or encountered it, it was like, kind of a little pushback of, all my life I've been told to think outside the box. And what I mean here is like sometimes we do need to, I think inside the box. The reality is we do have certain constraints. We do have certain budgets. We do have certain laws. We do have certain policies. We do have certain constraints, right? Those constraints are boxes, perhaps in our society, perhaps on the workplace, perhaps in our families, whatever those constraints are. Sometimes we just say, oh, well, we just have this. It's just this way. When I do this, then I'll be able to thrive. When this happens, then I'll be able to thrive. When we have this law passed, then I'll be able to do this. When we have whatever it is, then I'll be able to do that. And I think that that is actually harmful, right? What are ways that we can think inside the box, right? Part of the anatomy of opportunity is thinking inside the box. It's saying, okay, great. If these are the limitations I've had, if this is what I've been given, I'm going to work it to the best of my ability. I love this picture. I'm going to cut a hole through the through the box, and I'm still going to look out. I'm going to be able to do what it is. I'm going to be creative in that space, right? I'm not going to wait for the box to disappear or for me to have the box thrown out, because sometimes that's not feasible and it's not going to happen perhaps in the time frame that we need it to happen in. So sometimes with the resources or the lack thereof, with the laws or with the policies, with whatever we've been given, we have to think inside the box of how are we going to get this done? How are we really going to promote thriving and justice and equity in the boxes that we have been given, instead of waiting for us to eliminate those boxes? How are we going to do that? I think it starts with the opportunity team that I've been just talking about. Really reassessing what we value and why, I think, is integral. Understanding how discrimination and equity operates here. I think we always should constantly be asking ourselves this question, not if it's operating, but how is it operating? And what are the hidden and invisible facets? I just think over the past several years, I've just heard so many people talk about the invisibility feature, that not only that they're experiencing what they're experiencing, but how invisible it feels. And so how can we make women's experiences, girls' experiences much more visible so that we can provide the supports and again, provide what it is that they need to thrive? Again, invest in the environments that promote thriving above all. Let that be our North Star, our lamppost, so that that's what we're striving for. We're going to do that as we create equitable policies for sure, and inspire and advocate a next generation of thriving girls and women. One of the things that I just love as I sort of wrap up is this notion of thriving, right? This notion of where we started with the plant kind of emerging from concrete. I really just hope we can start to really abandon that as the norm, right? So many of us wear those badges of honor, right? But we need to evaluate, what do we celebrate and reward in the name of some of these spaces, in the name of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in this work. Sometimes it is this picture, right? We are celebrating and rewarding the woman who is trying to do it all, right? Who is carrying it all. It's overwhelming, it's stressful, it's chronic and toxic stress. She's trying to do it all. And while women, so many girls and women have made such huge advancements, such huge accomplishments, and we are in so many ways in much better spaces. But the reality is, there also are so many women who are feeling like this, that while they're doing it, they are not doing it well, right? They have a huge burden that they're carrying. They're stressed out, and they are not feeling supported, and they are not thriving. So on the outside world, we could look at them and say, wow, look at what she's carrying. That's brilliant. That's amazing. Look how wonderful she is for carrying all those boxes. And why can't you carry more boxes? And you should be carrying more boxes too, right? But no, this is not thriving. This is not our goal. This is not healthy. This is not what opportunity looks like at all. And so I want us all to deconstruct this notion of, this is what we're striving for. This is not what we want to celebrate. This is not what we want to value. So we have to think about, what are the ways our workspaces, our community, our policies actually celebrate this. We have to stop celebrating it because this is what we're striving for inadvertently. Because what we want for the girls, for the next generation, we want them to truly be able to thrive. That smile, I think, just says it all. We want them to experience joy. We want them to experience fulfillment. We want them to not just be included in a diverse way in their representation, not just be included, not just feel like they belong, and definitely want them to have equitable access to everything, but we want them to be able to thrive. We want them to have all that they need to thrive. We want all of the barriers that they experience at the macro level, at the micro level, to be eliminated. And so as I end, I oftentimes, I just love this quote. I often use it. And I will end with it because I think it really just sums up everything that we have discussed. It is a quote by Mae C. Jemison, and it says, never be limited by other people's limited imaginations, and never limit others because of your limited imagination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robertson-James. We really appreciate your time with us today. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you for all the reminders that you shared with us, to nurture creativity, reframe failures, think inside the box. We're, like you said, we're always told to think outside the box. What a refreshing way to consider the fact that, thinking inside the box will give us some freedom as well. And have an opportunity team. Like, thank you for that reminder that no matter where we are in our career, having that opportunity team, seeking people who can support us and for whom we can be a support, is really important as well. And investing in environments that promote thriving, that is so, so important. So we have at least one question in our Q&A, and that question was, please explain the distinction between inclusion and belonging, which seem to overlap.
Certainly, yes, thank you. And these, again, we could have a whole hour just on these terms. These are just really, I was just using very sort of milled down definitions, but certainly, inclusion, we're thinking of whose voices are included, right? Who is included, who's not at the table oftentimes. So making sure that diverse perspectives are included, diverse people are included and considered, right? So that are a part. So inclusion. So if we think about diversity as that representation, so making sure that different parts of whatever we're looking at are represented, right? And so different segments of our population are represented. That's diversity. Inclusion, right? But just because people are, let's say if in a school, just because they're there doesn't mean that they are included, right? That they're included on committees, that they're included on in activities, that they're included in sports, that they're included in these different ways. And so thinking about people have access to actually be included in the different spaces. Belonging is, do they feel that they belong? Do they feel a part of the community? Do they feel that they are able to be successful, to excel in those spaces? And so belonging kind of takes it up a notch, that they're not just there, they're not just included, but they actually feel a part of, a member of that space. And they're able to be successful. And ultimately, some definitions do include this notion of thriving, that they're able to excel in those communities, but not all definitions include that. A lot of people kind of stop at the feeling of membership. So I would say those are kind of the big differences between those terms.
You spoke about reframing failures in a way that can be supportive of other women, because the images that we see on television, on social media, it's snapshots of the great things that are happening in our lives, right? I don't think I post any of the bad things that ever happened in my life. People just see the wonderful things. But how do we develop the courage, I would say, especially in the workplace, to be able to reframe our failures and get to the point where failures may be seen as opportunities? You said it's a part of growth. So could you just take a minute to address that, please?
Yes, no, what a brilliant question. I think it is so important to actually reframe our failures and to share them. And you're right, it is surely an act of courage. I think it starts with actually leadership and having a culture where it is normalized. And you see this, I was just listening to something in some tech spaces where they know that as they're trying to strive for innovation, that much of what they create will fail, right? That's a part of the journey. Like every beta version of whatever is not going to be successful, right? Every idea is not going to be successful, but it is this notion that in order to find the thing that is, you have to keep on trying, and there's going to be lots of things that fail. But it's a culture that supports that. They don't see failure as something wrong. It's a part of a natural part towards a journey. And I think that if that mindset that is very, very narrowly implemented in only very specific spaces, that if we could kind of zoom out and have that be sort of the predominant culture in so many spaces, I think that starts with sharing failures in safe ways, and obviously ways that make sense and are appropriate for us to share. But I also think that it starts with also offering grace to people as they try to share, and to model, what this looks like, right? And to discuss, you're right, it's not often that we're going to go on social media and say, guess what I did today? This blunder. But I think that these are things that we can do in safe spaces, and then maybe work our courage up. So I think we can share some of our failures with our children sometimes, or our family members, right? Oh gosh, I had a hard day today. This is what happened. Or you know what? I was over here and I thought about this, and I just didn't have it today. Or you know what? I meant to do this and I totally I don't know what happened, so letting them know that you're human, you're not perfect.
Right.
And I think it starts with those closest to you. I think you can start with the courage with those closest to you, your family, your friends, um, your children, if you have them, and then you can start to model it up to maybe close friends, close co-workers, and then modeling it up. But I think for leaders, I would really push to have a climate, to have a culture where you really reward. I think it goes back to what we reward. We don't share our failures because we don't reward them, right? So if we have a way to reward, and that's why it's so prevalent in tech spaces because they're rewarded for trying. They're not rewarding for succeeding. They're rewarded for how many ideas and options. Okay, because they know you got to get to 50 the bad ideas to get to the one good one. So let's get the 50 out the way. And if we started rewarding that more, I think that we would have it more often.